The first time I called 911 for my father, I was 12 years old and he told me I'd done exactly the right thing. The last time I called for him, I was 61, and I already knew what the paramedics were going to say before they said it. That's not a coincidence. That's 61 years of a man teaching you, without ever meaning to, what it looks like when someone shows up. Harold Voss never talked about love. He built things instead. A porch swing the summer I turned 9. A treehouse that outlasted 3 different owners of our old house on Denby Lane. A folding table he still set up every Sunday for anyone who wandered in hungry, right up until his knees wouldn't let him stand at a stove anymore. When my mother passed 8 years back, a Tuesday in March that still smells like hospital coffee whenever I think about it, my father didn't fall apart. He grieved the way he'd done everything else, quiet and upright, and he never once called me to say he couldn't manage, not once in 8 years. So when Harold Voss called me at 6:15 on a Thursday morning and told me his leg had gone numb from the knee down and he couldn't feel his foot on the brake pedal, I didn't ask questions. 53 years of that man's steadiness doesn't produce a son who hesitates. It produces a son who moves. What nobody prepares you for is who's standing in the kitchen when you try to. Welcome back to the channel. If this is your first time here, settle in, because this one's going to sit with you a while. Tell me where you're watching from down in the comments. Hit that like button, and if you haven't subscribed yet, now's a good time. Let's get into it. My name is Gerald Voss. I'm 62 years old. I spent 30 years running a hardware store on Route 9 before I sold it and retired into a life I thought was going to be easy. I was the kind of husband who believed avoiding a fight was the same thing as having a good marriage. Took me a long time to learn how wrong that was. It was a Thursday, the 9th of October, 6:15 in the morning. I remember the exact time because I was standing at the kitchen counter waiting on the toaster, half asleep, when my phone lit up on the table. Dad. I picked up before the second ring finished. Gerald. His voice was off, thinner than I'd heard it in years. This was a man who'd walked away from a ladder, fall at 70, without so much as a limp, who'd never once in his life used the word help unless somebody else needed it. Dad, you okay? I don't want to make a thing of it. There it is. 84 years old and still apologizing for existing. Make a thing of what? I said, already moving toward the hall closet for my shoes. My leg's gone numb, Gerald, below the knee. I can't feel the pedal right. He'd been driving himself to his cardiologist appointment that morning, same as he always insisted on doing. Dad, stop. Don't drive anywhere. I'm coming to you. I'm fine to sit here. Dad, stop talking and sit down. A pause, and then something that might have been a laugh, small and tired. Okay, son. I hung up and stood there for exactly 2 seconds doing the math. My own truck was up on blocks in the driveway, the transmission finally giving out after 210,000 miles, waiting on a part that wouldn't come in until Monday. Marilyn's car, a white Buick Enclave she babied like a third child, sat in the garage with a full tank, because Marilyn never let that car dip below half. I could hear her in the bathroom, blow dryer running. I walked to the bottom of the stairs and called up. Marilyn. The dryer kept going. Marilyn. It clicked off. What? Not what's wrong. Just what? Flat, already irritated at being interrupted. I need to borrow the Buick. My dad's leg's gone numb. He can't drive. I need to get him to the ER. I'll be back as soon as I can. Silence. Not the kind where somebody's thinking it over. The kind where somebody already knows what they're going to say and is deciding how sharp to make it. She came to the top of the stairs in her robe, one towel around her shoulders, her face doing that thing it does when she's already decided the conversation is over before it started. Gerald, I have the Whitmore closing at 10. I cannot be without a car today. Marilyn, this is my father. Then call an ambulance. He hates ambulances. You know that. Ever since the one that took 40 minutes to get to your mother. So call somebody else. She was already turning back down the hallway. I have 22 years riding on this closing, and I am not walking into it flustered because you couldn't plan ahead for your own truck breaking down. I stood there, completely still. Marilyn. My voice came out quieter than I expected it to. His leg is numb below the knee. That's a stroke symptom. That's not a fender bender. She stopped, turned halfway, and looked at me with an expression I don't think I'll ever forget. Not worry. Not even irritation anymore. Just calculation. He's your father, Gerald, not mine. A pause. You'll figure something out. Figure something out. She went back into the bedroom. She didn't slam the door. She closed it soft, like she'd just told me we were low on coffee filters. Like an 84-year-old man's leg going numb was a scheduling inconvenience. She simply didn't have room for that morning. I stood in that hallway for a moment, just a moment, and then I pulled out my phone. Ronnie Pratt lived 2 doors down, a retired mail carrier, 70 years old, drove a Ford Ranger that had more rust than paint but never once failed to start. He'd known my father since before I was born, had been a pallbearer at my mother's funeral. He picked up on the first ring. Gerald, what's going on? Ronnie, I need a favor, and I need it fast. My dad's leg's gone numb, my truck's down, Marilyn's got a closing. Can you run us to Caldwell General? He didn't pause. Give me 3 minutes, I'll be in your driveway. That was it. No conditions, no hesitation, no closing to check. I called my father back immediately. I'm coming, Dad. Ronnie's driving. Just sit tight. Don't try to stand up on that leg. You hear me? A small sound on the other end, almost a laugh. Okay, boy. Ronnie pulled up in 2 minutes and 40 seconds. I counted. My father lived 15 minutes across town in the house I grew up in, a low brick ranch on Ferncrest Road, and, by the time we got there, he was sitting on the porch steps in his good flannel jacket like he was heading somewhere important, because he was. He got into the truck slow, careful, gripping the door frame, and I saw his jaw tighten when his leg didn't cooperate the way he wanted it to. The whole ride to Caldwell General he apologized. Sorry to pull you two out like this. Ronnie didn't even glance over. Wasn't doing anything but watching the morning news anyway, Harold. Anything good on it? Never is. My father actually laughed at that, a real one, and I looked out the window at our little town going by, gray October sky, and I felt two things at the same time. Gratitude, for Ronnie, and something else, something cold and quiet, for Marilyn. I didn't look at it too closely yet. I just let it sit. Caldwell General was busier than you'd expect for a Thursday morning. We checked in at 6:52. A nurse named Denise, gray hair pulled back tight, the kind of calm that comes from 20 years of not being surprised by anything, got my father into a room within 10 minutes. The doctor on call was a younger man, Dr. Patel, careful hands, unhurried voice. Mr. Voss, given the numbness and your cardiac history, I want to rule out a few things. We're going to run some imaging and check your circulation. My father looked over at me, and for just a second, underneath 84 years of not needing anybody, I saw a boy asking if it was going to be all right. Do whatever he says, Dad, I told him. He nodded, and then he reached over and gripped my hand once, hard. You came, he said, simple as that, like some part of him hadn't been sure I would. That nearly took the legs out from under me right there in that curtained room. I'll always come, Dad. He squeezed my hand and let his eyes fall shut. I sat in that waiting room for almost 3 hours. Vinyl chairs, a television bolted in the corner running a cooking show nobody was watching, a coffee machine near the vending area that produced something the color of dishwater. Marilyn didn't text once. Not is he okay? Nothing. At 9:40, Dr. Patel came out, his face careful but not alarmed. Mr. Voss, your father had what we're calling a transient ischemic event, a warning stroke. We caught it early and there's no lasting damage that we can find, but we want to keep him overnight for observation and start him on blood thinners. Is he stable? He's stable, and he's already asked twice if there's a decent crossword in this building. I laughed out loud, the first real laugh all morning. That's him. Can I see him? Give the nurses 20 minutes to get him settled. I sat back down and put my head in my hands. Figure something out, she'd said. Figure something out, while she sat in a conference room going over closing documents, while my father's leg had gone dead beneath him on his way to a cardiology appointment he never made it to. I figured it out all right. I called Ronnie, who'd waited in the parking lot the entire 3 hours without being asked to. He's stable, I told him. Thank God, Ronnie said, and meant every word of it. Ronnie, I don't know how to thank you for this, Gerald. His voice was steady, plain. That's just what people do. I sat with that sentence a long moment. Some people. I stayed with my father until almost 4 that afternoon. We watched half of a game show with the sound on, and he beat me twice at a word puzzle he made up on the spot involving hospital equipment and state capitals, sharper on his worst day than I am on my best. Around 3:30, right before I had to head home, he took my hand again, and this time his voice had changed, that thin morning voice gone, replaced by something older and more certain. Gerald. Yeah, Dad, Marilyn didn't come. It wasn't a question. I didn't answer right away. She had the closing. Just my name. That's all he needed to say. I looked at him, 84 years old, flannel jacket folded over the chair, eyes clear as they'd ever been. She had a closing, Dad, I said quietly. 22 years riding on it, apparently. The words landed in that room like something dropped from a height. My father didn't raise his voice, didn't say a single unkind word about Marilyn. He just nodded slowly and looked toward the window, the gray light going gold over the parking lot, and I saw something cross his face that looked a whole lot like a decision being made. He didn't say anything else about it. I kissed the top of his head at 3:50 and walked out into a cold, honest October afternoon, and somewhere on the drive home with Ronnie, watching the leaves come off the maples along Route 9, I realized I wasn't angry at Marilyn anymore. I was finished. If you've been with us a while, do me a favor and hit subscribe if you haven't already. It costs you nothing and it means a lot to this channel. Drop your thoughts down below while you're at it. Some people spend a whole marriage making withdrawals from an account they never once made a deposit into. Marilyn had been overdrawn for a long time. Friday, October 10th, 5:50 in the morning. I woke up before my alarm went off, which tells you something's sitting on your chest that sleep can't move for you. I lay there on my side of the bed, same side I'd slept on for 26 years, staring at the ceiling. Marilyn was still out cold beside me, breathing slow and even, not a single thing troubling her rest. That woman could sleep through an earthquake. I got up quiet, went down and made coffee, the loud grinder and all, and didn't feel one bit sorry about it. She'd chosen a closing over my father's leg going numb. She could survive a little noise. I sat at the kitchen table and watched the sun try to come up gray behind the Hendersons' fence. My phone sat face down on the table. No calls from Caldwell General, which at 7 in the morning is the best news there is. I thought about my father in that hospital bed, small against the pillow in his flannel, the way he'd gripped my hand and said you came like it had been a real question in his mind. 84 years of love folded into 2 words, and it hit me all over again sitting there with coffee going cold in my hands. He always came for me. Every single time, no conditions attached. The least I could do, the very least, was come for him. I was on my second cup when I heard Marilyn on the stairs. She came into the kitchen in her robe, glanced at the coffee maker, then at me. You made coffee. Every morning for 26 years, I said. Didn't realize that was still news. She poured herself a cup and leaned back against the counter, and there was a particular kind of silence that only exists between 2 people who've been married a long time, the kind that's waiting on somebody to bring something up. She finally did. How's Harold? Not Dad. Not your father. Harold. Like he was a name off a client list she was trying to place. Stable, I said. They're keeping him another night for observation. Good, she said, and I watched her actually taste the word before she let it out, like she wasn't sure it fit. How'd the closing go? I asked. She blinked, just once, but I caught it. It went fine. Gerald, I want you to understand. Yesterday was an impossible day for me. Impossible. I let that word sit there a second. Your father-in-law's leg went numb from a possible stroke and you were reviewing paperwork, but sure, impossible. Marilyn. Gerald. I said it the exact way my father had said my name the night before. Flat. Final. She stopped talking. I'm not doing this right now, I told her. I'm just trying to explain. I know. I heard you the first time. At the bottom of those stairs. I stood up, rinsed my mug, and picked up my keys, my spare keys, since my truck was still up on blocks, and walked toward the door. Where are you going? She asked. To see my father. I didn't look back at her. Ronnie drove me again. He didn't ask a single question, just had an old country station playing low and both hands loose on the wheel. Some friendships don't need conversation to run. We got to Caldwell General around 8:30. I'll be right here, he said. Ronnie, You don't have to sit out here all day again, Gerald. He looked at me over his glasses. I'll be here. Some people just show up, and you learn to make note of who they are. My father was sitting up when I walked in, color back in his face, that thin morning voice gone entirely. He'd refused the hospital gown by that point, sitting there in his own undershirt with his reading glasses on and a folded newspaper crossword in his lap. 6 letters, he said the second I stepped through the doorway. Dishonest. I stopped in the doorway and just looked at him. He peered up over the glasses with the straightest face God ever gave a man. For the puzzle, Gerald. I laughed so hard the nurse leaned in to check on us. Crooked, I said, dropping into the chair beside him. Crooked. He counted the boxes, wrote it in, sat back satisfied. You were always the sharp one. I'm your only kid, Dad. And still the sharp one. We sat like that a while. Easy, quiet. The kind of quiet that only happens between two people who've loved each other long enough not to need to fill it up. He finished a couple more clues. I drank hospital coffee that tasted like a punishment and didn't complain once, because sitting in that room with him, hard chair and all, was exactly where I wanted to be. Then he set the puzzle book down and folded his hands. I want to call Marlene this morning, he said. Marlene Higgs. Attorney, 30 years in Caldwell County, had handled my mother's estate and drawn up my father's will 6 years back. Sharp woman, precise, the kind who listens twice as much as she talks, which in my experience is rarer than it ought to be. I kept my voice even. Okay, I've been turning it over since last night, he said. Dad, you don't have to do anything today. Gerald Franklin Voss. Full name, all 3. Hadn't heard it since I was 16 and rolled the truck into a ditch on prom night. Don't finish that sentence. I closed my mouth. He looked at me with those clear, steady eyes, morning light coming soft through the window, and for a second he looked younger, or maybe he just looked exactly like himself. My father, the most solid thing I'd ever had in my life. I worked my whole life for what your mother and I built, he said quietly. We went without plenty of things so it would mean something when it went somewhere. A pause. To people who show up, I didn't say a word. Marilyn didn't show up, Gerald. I know, Dad. Not just yesterday. He picked up the puzzle book, not to work it, just to hold on to something. Not when your mother passed and there was a house full of casseroles to deal with. Not when I had the hip done and needed rides to therapy 3 times a week. Not last Thanksgiving when you had to leave the table because I fell in the garage. He looked up at me. And not yesterday, when my leg went dead under me. She had a closing. Every example landed like a stone dropped in still water, slow and sinking deep, because he was right. He'd always been right, and I'd spent years making excuses on her behalf. I'm not angry, son, he said, and the remarkable thing was, he wasn't, his voice steady as a level laid flat. I'm just done being surprised by it. He reached for his phone on the tray table, found a small card tucked in his wallet with Marlene's direct line written in his own careful hand. He'd come prepared. My father didn't do anything on impulse. This had been building a lot longer than one hospital stay. You want me to step out? I asked. He thought about it. No. Stay. One word, and something in me went completely still and grateful. He dialed at 9:15. She picked up on the second ring. Marlene Higgs. Marlene, it's Harold Voss. Hope I'm not catching you too early. Never too early for you, Harold. How are you feeling? I'm at Caldwell General, actually. A pause on her end. Serious? Serious enough to clear my head some, he said. And even then, calling his lawyer from a hospital bed the morning after a warning stroke, there was a dignity in his voice you can't fake, the kind that gets earned over 84 years of doing right even when it costs you. Marlene, I need to make some changes to my will. Silence on her end, professional, absorbing rather than stalling. Of course, Harold, you want me to come to you? If you could, today, if it's possible, I've got some specific things in mind. I can be there by 2. Perfect, he said, and glanced over at me. My son will be here. Good, I'll see you both at 2. Marlene Higgs walked in at 1:55. Gray blazer, leather folio. The kind of handshake that tells you she spent 30 years being underestimated and correcting people about it. She sat across from my father with a legal pad and listened more than she talked. I sat in the corner, quiet, a witness to something I understood was bigger than me. 40 minutes later, when she clicked her pen shut and slid the folio back into her bag, whatever Marilyn had spent 26 years assuming about our future had been quietly and completely rewritten. The house on Ferncrest Road, paid off since 1998. The retirement accounts my father had built dollar by dollar over 4 decades at the plant. His tools, his old Chevrolet pickup that still ran perfect under a tarp in the carport, the truck he'd taught me to drive stick in the parking lot of the Methodist church when I was 15. And $8,000 set aside specifically for the volunteer fire department in town because Harold Voss had ridden with them as an EMT for 11 years after he retired from the plant, because that's who he'd always been. Marilyn's name appeared nowhere in it. "You'll figure something out," somebody had said. Turns out, he did. When Marlene stood to leave, she shook my hand at the door and looked back at my father, already resettled into his crossword like nothing at all had happened. "Your father," she said quietly, "is one of the sharpest men I've represented in 30 years. "I know it," I told her. "Always have." Ronnie drove me home around 4:30. He didn't ask anything, just read my face the way old friends do, checking that I was still standing, not fishing for details. "Everything all right?" "Everything's exactly the way it should be," I told him. He nodded and pulled out of the lot. My phone stayed quiet in my pocket the whole ride. Marilyn hadn't called once all day. She had no idea. But she would. Saturday, October 11th, 8 in the morning. I was standing in Denny's auto repair on Route 9 when it started. My truck was finally ready, new transmission in, and Denny had thrown in an oil change besides, on account of our boys playing Legion ball together back in the day. I was signing the invoice when my phone buzzed. "Marilyn." I let it ring. Not strategy. I just didn't have anything worth saying yet. I finished with Denny, shook his hand, and walked out into a cold, honest morning. I got in the truck, let it warm, and thought about my father, about bringing him home to Ferncrest Road where he belonged, getting him settled with his crossword and his tools and his dignity fully intact. That's what the day was about. Not Marilyn, not the calls. My phone buzzed again, then a third time, a fourth, a fifth. Something's moving, I thought, and pulled out toward Caldwell General. I had a father to bring home. He was ready when I got there. 8:45, flannel jacket, small bag packed neat. Denise, the nurse, walking alongside the mandatory wheelchair, hospital policy, non-negotiable, which he'd already argued and lost with his usual grace. The second he cleared the automatic doors, he stood right up out of that chair. "I can walk to my own son's truck," he announced to the whole parking lot. I had a warning, not a leg amputation. Denise laughed, the real kind. She held his hand a second. "You take care of yourself, Mr. Voss. Always do, sweetheart," he said, and squeezed her hand back. "You're one of the good ones. Don't let anybody convince you otherwise." Even leaving that hospital, my father left people better than he found them. I got him settled in the passenger seat, slow but steady on his own, which mattered to him more than any prescription in that little white bag. He looked over at my phone lighting up in the cup holder. Marilyn, Marilyn, Marilyn. 9 missed calls before 9 in the morning. He didn't say a word, just buckled his belt and smiled faint out the window, a man at peace with a decision already made. I got him home to Ferncrest Road first. The brick ranch quiet and familiar at the end of the road, the same porch I'd learned to ride a bike off of, the same kitchen table, where he'd helped me with algebra and sat with me the morning after my mother's funeral without saying a single word, because some things don't need words. I made him tea, the way he liked it, and went through his new prescriptions one by one, reading labels out loud while he sat with both hands wrapped around the mug. "This one's for the blood thinning, twice daily," he said, watching me from across that table. "Sit down," he said softly. I sat. He reached across and put both his hands over mine. Hands that had built a treehouse and a porch swing, and held mine in the back of Ronnie's truck 2 days before. "I need you to hear me," he said. "I'm listening, Dad. What I did with the will, I didn't do it to punish her." His eyes were steady, no bitterness in them at all, just the plain truth the way he always delivered it. "I did it because it's right. Because your mother and I built something together, and it ought to go to somebody who understands what building something together actually costs." He squeezed my hand once. You understand that? I did, all the way down. And Gerald, his voice dropped, more deliberate, not softer. I need you to think hard about your own life, not the money. Whether you're happy. Whether you're loved the way a man ought to be loved. He looked at me a long moment. You've been showing up alone a long time, son. And a man who shows up deserves somebody standing beside him when he does. The kitchen went completely still. Somewhere outside, a dog barked twice and quit. Every word of it was true. My throat went tight and my eyes stung at the corners, and I didn't look away from him. I know, Dad, I said, and my voice came out rough and honest. He nodded once, slow, like that was exactly what he needed. Then he patted my hand twice and let it go. Good, he said. Now, are you going to answer that phone or not? My phone sat buzzing on the table between us. Marilyn, call number 26. I looked at it, looked at him. He raised one eyebrow. I picked it up, turned it face down, let it buzz itself out. Not yet, I said. The corner of his mouth moved, just barely. Not yet, he repeated, like he was tasting the patience in it. I'll check on you tonight, I told him, and every morning after. He waved a hand. I know you will. I mean it, Dad, Gerald. He looked at me over his glasses. I know you mean it. You always have. I left Ferncrest Road at 1 and drove home, parked behind Marilyn's white Buick in the driveway, and sat in the cab a full minute. 31 missed calls. 31. I went inside. She was on the edge of the couch in her work clothes, both hands wrapped around her phone like it was the only solid thing left to her. She looked up the second I came through the door, eyes raw, sleepless, the careful composure she wore like a second skin cracked clean through, and underneath it was a woman who'd spent the whole day realizing exactly what she'd done. Gerald. She stood up fast. I've been calling you all day. I know, I said. I set my keys on the hook and thought about Thursday morning, my father's leg gone dead beneath him, about the imaging and the blood work and doctor. Patel's careful face telling me it was a warning shot, about her 22 years riding on a closing while my father sat in a curtained room not knowing yet if he'd walk out of their hole. I let that sit in my chest one full second. Then I looked at my wife. Did you know? I asked. About the will. Did you know she was going to do this? Her voice cracked on the last word. No, Gerald, I didn't know. I found out with everyone else. She pressed her fingers to her mouth, tried to gather herself. And when she spoke again, it was quieter, more controlled. But fear ran under every word of it. The real kind, the kind that shows up right when consequences finally catch a person. He took me completely out of it. Marlene's office called to confirm the changes were filed, and I. Do you understand what that means, Gerald? I understand exactly what it means, I told her, calm as I've ever been in my life. Then talk to him, she said, the composure slipping again. Tell him it was a misunderstanding. Tell him I was going to come by the hospital. You just what? She stopped. I took one step toward her, not angry, just present. Present in a way I hadn't let myself be in years, because I finally had nothing left in me to protect. You had a closing with the Whitmores, I said, while my father sat in a hospital bed not knowing if he'd walk right again, while Ronnie Pratt sat in that parking lot for 3 hours because that's what people do. The color drained clean out of her face. Harold made his decision, I said, the same way you made yours. Clear and deliberate, and without asking a single soul's permission. Gerald, please. He spent 84 years showing up. My voice didn't need to rise. For my mother, for me, for every soul he's ever loved. Never once, not one time, has that man chosen paperwork over somebody who needed him. I looked at her a long moment. He just finally quit, expecting everybody else to do the same. The living room went dead silent. She looked at me, really looked, maybe for the first time in years, and I watched something move across her face, past fear now, into something deeper, the specific look of a person finally understanding the full size of what they'd lost. Not the money. Me. Her phone buzzed in her hand. She looked down at it. My father's name lit up on the screen. She looked back up at me, eyes wide, something in them that might have been hope. I looked at her exactly 1 second and felt the last thread I'd been holding onto for 26 years finally go slack. Not with anger, with release. I picked my keys back up off the hook. I'm going to check on my father, I said. I opened the front door, and the October air hit me clean and cold and honest. "Oh," I said, turning back one last time. Marilyn standing there in the middle of that living room, my father's name still glowing on her screen, 38 calls worth of consequence written across her face by then. "You should probably answer that." I closed the door behind me and let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding on to for years. I stood on that porch a minute, cold air on my face, and something settled over me I hadn't felt in longer than I could remember. Not anger, just clarity. The plain kind that comes to a man who's finally stopped telling himself things were fine. I hadn't been married for 26 years. I'd been enduring for 26 years, and there's a difference between the two, a difference the size of a whole life. My father's hospital bed didn't plant that thought in me. It just burned off the fog and showed me what had been sitting there underneath the whole time. I walked to my truck, started the engine, let the radio come on low, something old my father used to hum out in the carport on Saturday mornings, and I let it play the whole way, and somewhere in the part of a man that knows things before he's ready to say them out loud, I already knew it wasn't just one night I wasn't going back for. If this story meant something to you, hit that like button, subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one.